Okay, so welcome everyone to Lubbock. I know some faces here and then don't know a lot of others, so welcome. I hope you've been enjoying your time here. I'm an assistant professor here in atmospheric sciences and I've been here for almost 3 years now. And so I was asked to talk both about my background and experience and early career kind of trajectory, and I would say I'm still early career, so that's good. And then climate and health, and my main focus in climate and health research is on extreme temperatures, and I use a lot of instrumentation. So Derek asked if I would bring some of my instruments from my lab here to show you how we collect data in the field for urban heat island kind of research. So I'll start out with first some of my early career experiences. So I was at the University of Guelph. Interesting. The title isn't showing. So I was at the University of Guelph for almost 8 years. I did my undergrad in the School of Environmental Sciences. I was also a microbiology research assistant. The slides are being weird. So you can see in my undergrad I had some field experience setting up eddy covariance systems, plant towers there. So that was a really neat experience for me to see if I like instruments. Ultimately, that's not the way I went with, these slides are not looking the same. Okay, that's not the way I went with my career, but I fell in love with weather in my undergrad and decided that was the way I wanted to go, and then I was offered a really neat PhD position studying thermal comfort and extreme heat in humans and getting to use a lot of the research equipment that I wanted to. So I looked at heat stress outdoors in urban areas and emergency preparedness. One of the reasons I really liked that project was because I was a runner, so the entire time I was doing my undergrad and PhD, I was competing for the University of Guelph, and I competed for my province and actually my country at Pan Am's at one point. So I was really driven to understand physiologial processes also during extreme heat. So that was fun. So that was all in Canada, and I stayed in Canada for my postdoc and went to work at Health Canada actually, which was an interesting position in the government. And so I did research in the Environmental Health Science Research Bureau, and it was a pretty good experience. After about 3 or 4 months, I realized government wasn't for me, especially at that time in Canada. We had a Prime Minister who was not on board with anything in climate research. So getting our papers through the initial internal review of the government was tough. We were not allowed to use the word climate or change together. And I was also, it was an interesting experience because I got a lot of work done, but it wasn't as creative as I would have liked to be during my postdoc. I think in academia you get a greater chance to kind of do what you want, but in government, it's more you're on a government project pushing for the agenda of power, it felt like. And I was also told after about 3 or 4 months that to stop being so ambitious because that was going to get me in trouble. And so I went, oh my gosh, this is not for me. So I started looking for jobs back in academia because I miss teaching and all that kind of stuff. And I also did, in between this job in Health Canada, I went down to Miami and got some experience as a visiting scholar there. And I think that position is what really kind of boosted me up and got me going on the trajectory back towards academia. And it allowed some of the employers that I was applying to see that I could move around different places and work with different people and adapt to new places. So that was me, and then I ended up here in 2013. In August, I started as assistant professor in atmospheric sciences, but also working really closely with everyone in the Climate Science Center. So I was hired largely to bridge that gap between weather and climate on campus. So that was fun. And my main area that I work on here is human biometeorology in urban areas, and that's what I'll talk to you about a lot today under the lens of climate change. So I'm saving, hopefully I have a half an hour at the end for anyone who has questions about any of that, and then I'll kind of jump into how I got into this and what the passion, or where the passion began and why it's important in the instrumentation that we use. So I study biometeorology or bioclimatology, so I'm looking at the impacts of weather and climate on people's health, pretty much, so the atmospheric processes. So we often ask the question, how does the weather climate impact the well-being of a certain population? It could be the entire population, it could be a subset of the population. Mainly I focus on the impacts of extreme heat and the air pollution. So in today's talk, I'm going to start big and then kind of go small. So the reason heat waves are studied so much and the reason it's so important to understand them, and the synoptic air mass work, some of it that I've done, and then go down to the urban heat island at the city scale, and then go down even further to human microclimates and why I brought some of these instruments here today. So we know heat waves are a big deal, and the Southwest has been having them for a little while. I don't know if I want to be in 120-degree Fahrenheit weather. I don't think I'd survive. So a few things have come up over the past few years. Obama initiated the Climate Health Summit, and within that plan, he said, we want a new national integrated heat health warning system, which you can see here in the bottom left corner. And so this started to be developed last year in Chicago. Last year in Chicago, it was the 20th anniversary of the Chicago heat wave, where in 1995, 700 people died due to heat. And I think John was telling me he remembers that very.
Yeah, because I was there in Chicago during that heat wave.
So a lot of us might not remember that. I certainly don't. But 20 years later, now we're kind of developing this integrated heat health warning system, not just for heat waves, but looking long-term into the impacts of climate change. And they also want to be able to say 3, 4, 5, how far in advance can they have these warnings in place for different sectors of the city, so urban planners and water and power and public health, not just for people like you and I. So this is why it's called the National Integrated Heat Health Warning System, and we're kind of pushing that forward now and holding workshops and all that kind of stuff. So over the years, we've seen things like this with Australia having to put a brand new color on their color map because they didn't have that color until a couple summers ago on their color map, so they had never seen temperatures like that. So we know it's getting hotter, but we also know that people are extremely impacted by the heat, and this is the top 10 deadliest heat waves in history. So the top one is the most well-known, the 2003 European heat wave, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. And then the most recent on there is the Indian heat wave in 2015. 2,500 people perished. So it's a big deal, and in the US it's also a big deal, and you think, this shouldn't really be happening, right? So extreme heat kills approximately 3,200 people in the US. So during my PhD, I kind of started small scale, and then I started reading literature on some of this kind of stuff, and I got really, really, really involved in that. And I actually didn't mention, I did start out as a master's student, and after about 4 semesters, I had published and started looking broader scale, and my committee said, let's just put you into a PhD now. So I actually didn't do a master's, I rolled up into a PhD. I was very fortunate, but it took me a very long time to decide that. And one of the reasons that they wanted to put me into PhD was because I started looking broader, and the other students weren't doing that. I started really seeing where my research applies, not just at the fine scale that I was working at, but at larger scales in cities and around the world. So when we see statistics like this, that's when I start thinking, wow, why does this happen? And so this figure is from the most recent United States, so the USGCRP, and again, it's showing Chicago there and how many people died during that heat wave. And then you see plots like this, and this is from Catherine, that historically extreme heat is not that common if we look at days over 100, but if we look at what happened in 2011 or what can happen in the future with our lower scenario, we see these days increasing. And then we see scary plots like this, that the higher we go, the number of days over 100 is increasing. And that can be scary, especially when we see the number of people dying during heat waves. So the question then is, if we've committed to a certain trajectory, how do we adapt? And if we can possibly do so, can we mitigate so that we stop this from happening? So those are the kind of questions that go on in my head all the time. And adaptation with urban heat island mitigation techniques is the way that the place I find myself most of the time these days. And how can we adapt at the small scale and then have those changes accumulate to be bigger positive changes on a larger scale across the city. And that's why I'm going to talk about the urban heat island in a minute. But first, I did get to do some work in synoptic air mass climatology, climate change and air pollution. This is just one of the figures that we created from a big report for the Union of Concerned Scientists in 2012, where we're looking at the changing frequency of air masses across the US. And here we're looking at the moist tropical plus air mass. So an air mass that's really, really hot and really, really humid, and how frequently has it been present in St. Louis over the last 60 years. So this is extremely simple plot to make, but it's showing exactly what the plots that you might see from other research scientists like Catherine is showing, an increasing trend of the hot, humid air masses or the hot, dry air masses, and actually then obviously a decreasing trend of other air masses, which were our colder air masses throughout the summer. In conjunction with this, I did this all across the Midwest, and then did the same kind of plots all across Canada, and found similar results. Even, especially the further we go north, we're seeing these trends become stronger and more significant in terms of rising warm air and then falling trends in the polar air. And then because these air masses, my advisor at Health Canada really liked the use of these air masses, so we started combining it with air pollution and mortality data and looking at the trends across Canada for the last 20 or 30 years of what is the connection and the interactions between the air mass and air pollution and human mortality at different age levels and different health outcomes. So we looked at respiratory versus cardiovascular. So that's when I really got to start working with real health data, which was really fun. I haven't done as much epidemiological work since leaving Health Canada, but it's something that I think it's important to understand, but at the same time you'll notice that my research is kind of going back down to the individual level to answer some of the bigger questions. So I like to use this plot. Catherine might have used this week, but preparing for the increasing temperatures, because it's really not much different than what I just showed you. But here we're looking at the maximum from the variability. And so then when I look at this and we stretch it out, we see the range increase, and then we see larger extremes. So what I'm really focused on is those top peaks when there's a heat wave. Or what is that maximum temperature that someone's going to have to deal with, and how can we adapt and prepare so that they are so impacted by it. So I see this, and I see, all right, we see rising temperatures, and then also on top of the rising temperatures, we have our anthropogenic heating, such as what's going on in the urban heat island. So I kind of look at it as climate change, maybe +2 degrees, plus the urban heat island effect. All right, how can we think about mitigating both of those? So everyone is probably well aware of the urban heat island effect, just those differences in temperatures from the rural area to the urban area. This can vary quite a bit throughout the year, and then throughout the day, and then overnight. It's the greatest overnight. And so in terms of this, we know that it's higher usually in the urban area. In the downtown, we can have little cool pockets, we can have little hot pockets. We want to understand how can we make more cooler pockets in the hotter cities and get rid of those hotter pockets. So in terms of the urban heat island, we know it's amplified by population growth and climate change. Right now, 50% of the world's population lives in cities, and that's just going to keep increasing. And a lot of urban areas commonly lack vegetation, so it's really high thermally massive materials that are absorbing a lot of heat during the day and then emitting it overnight. And that's why you see the highest intensity overnight. So with a lot of our work, we're seeing this increasing importance of understanding the canyon geometry and the radiation fluxes that are going on inside the canyons, and then also understanding the difference in day versus nighttime. Because when you have a heat wave and the temperatures aren't dropping overnight, that's actually when we start seeing the highest number of deaths. After 3 or 4 days, we see this lag effect where the maximum deaths occur 3 days later after a really strong heat wave that we're not seeing temperatures cool down overnight. So this is really common in humid areas. So if you're from a humid area, you know that overnight the temperatures don't drop very much. But you'll notice here in Lubbock, it's pretty dry, the temperatures drop very nicely at night. And so we actually, in terms of looking at the data here in Lubbock, we're okay during the heat actually, which is good to see. But a lot of that is because we don't see the really high overnight temperatures. They drop nicely. So I wanted to give you kind of an example study that we did in the Northeast. We looked at Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Baltimore to understand the spatial and temporal dynamics of the urban heat island under these different air masses that I've mentioned. So how does it vary if it's a moist air mass versus a dry air mass, let's say? And so we have this data, I'll go back here, from Earth Network and WeatherBug, and they set up these stations about 9 years ago, 10 years ago now. And in New York, we had 243 stations to use, just little WeatherBug weather stations. They're still up. In Boston and the other cities, there's about 150 or 200. Obviously, we didn't use all the data from every station because it wasn't all complete records, but we used all the stations that we could that had the full 8 or 9 year record. So I wanted to give an example of how we looked at this, and this is work from one of my master's students last year. So if we look at the difference in the dry tropical and moist tropical air mass over New York City, we can see that these are just the absolute temperature values. We're not looking at intensity or anything. So if the temperatures are much higher, or a little bit higher in the moist tropical, so that's interesting to see. And then it looks a little bit different on my computer, but you can start seeing pockets of hotter areas in the city under moist tropical, and then those pockets actually change under the dry tropical air mass. And what we also looked at was that signature. We really think, okay, the urban heat island is just this nice up plateau down, but it's not always that way. It depends on the way you look at it. So we could put here, you can see I have just a thick black line here. Those, using that line, we see this kind of urban heat island signature, but then using another line, we see a completely different one. So it's all dependent on what way you decide to look at it. So we're starting to plot these in 3D so that we can look at an actual surface and then see how it's changing in all the cities under the different air masses during the day, overnight. Because when you talk to someone in an urban planning or in public health, what they actually want to know is what are the hotspots in the city that we need to be focusing our resources. So it's really fun to get a chance to interact with the stakeholders, and they see this data, and they say, okay, that's really cool. All right, so let's go figure out exactly where that is and what is it like there? How much impermeable surface is there? So far, we've done some work in Toronto too to see how canopy cover relates to the number of emergency distress calls during a heat wave. And we find the more canopy cover, the less calls in the census tract, which is interesting, and the less permeable or impermeable surfaces, the less calls in that census tract. So we start to see these connections to urban design and the urban heat island effect, and then to human health, which is interesting. Okay, so, but answering the bigger questions, we have to actually go down to the micro scale. So getting into collecting data with for temperature, radiation, air pollution. And that connects to these urban heat island and health adaptation measures and specific impacts to human health and infrastructure. So I mentioned the radiation in urban environment. And that's extremely important in developing that urban heat island. We have the radiation come in, hits a building, or it's absorbed by the building, it bounces off or emitted off, and then it hits another building. And we call that radiation trapping. So as the day goes on in the morning, we'll keep heating up, and then overnight we'll start emitting that. And it obviously depends a lot on the type of material of the building. If it's concrete, if it's brick, if it's glass, it's going to be very different. But we're really focused on understanding the mean radiant temperature in different locations in a city, because it's actually under hot conditions, the mean radiant temperature is the most influential variable on heat stress. And so what the mean radiant temperature is that combination of all the energy fluxes towards you and away from you in terms of radiation. So your long wave, your short wave, at you and away. And the way we model it in a canyon is with a little cylinder. And so that's why I brought this instrument here, because this is how we try and collect our mean radiant temperature data. So we're getting the radiation absorbed by a cylinder, a human, and the air temperature also, both impact. So we call it the radiant temperature. And so other instruments, and I'll explain more about that in a minute, other instruments that we use, my favorite for radiation, and this will get you all your fluxes, is the net radiometer. And so we can set this up, and then we get our incoming solar and our outgoing solar, incoming long waves, outgoing long waves. So you have your glass domes for your solar. Some of you might have seen this if you've ever taken a meteorological class. And then you have your silicone domes for your long wave. And so these are really, really nice to have. They get the whole full 180 of the sky. And they're really accurate and quick response, but they're very expensive. And so that's one of the challenges we have. You don't even see these on a standard weather station at the airport. So it's hard to have this data at a fine scale that we want to see to understand the radiation fluxes in the urban area. So we've been starting to try and see what other radiation instruments can we use. And so that's why we started using the cylindrical radiation thermometer. So that's shown here. And this was actually created a long time ago by a few of my advisors back at my old university. And then I used it again for my PhD and then started building them here in the lab at Tech. But essentially all it is it's a copper cylinder filled with, you put a copper concentrate thermocouple in it and you fill it with conductive epoxy. And then you paint it to be the albedo of the human that you are trying to model. So you can do a different color. The average human albedo of a clothed person is about 0.37. That's why we painted it that color. And then we can set this up anywhere in the data logger to start collecting the temperature data. And then as long as we know wind and air temperature, we can calculate the mean radiant temperature. This costs about $40 to make. That net radiometer is about $7,000 to put out. So this is why if we can start putting these out more, we can get mean radiant temperatures for our city. So we're doing some tests to compare the net radiometers and for measuring the cylinder to the cylindrical radiation thermometer and a couple other low-cost options to see how accurate are they against the really expensive measurements versus the low-cost measurements. And we've done some tests already. And we're just going to keep validating and try to put something out. Yep.
So what's the frequencies here?
Whatever I said it at 1 second, half a second. Yeah, I can stress that. But it will not respond. So the net radiometer will respond really quickly to cloud cover, let's say. But the CRT might take a minute or two to respond to something like cloud cover. So it does not have the quick response. At the same time, if we think about the general weather station, how quickly is it collecting data? The quickest 5 minutes. A lot of times it just reports every hour. So if we can get something like the CRT or other low-cost instruments working at rates the same as weather stations, that would be really neat to have that data. The other one you see up here is the globe thermometer. And I'll let you guys kind of come see these or pass these around. But who's heard of the wet bulb globe thermometer? No. So this is actually developed for the military for heat stress in the 1930s. Finally applied, actually 1950s. And then a lot of athletes and sports events will use it. And there's actually a law in the NCAA that they have to have a wet bulb globe thermometer index measurement, and that's how they call their practices. If it's too hot, they'll cancel practice or change practice time. This is the standard globe that was created in the 50s. Now you might see handheld devices that people can kind of carry around with them. But a lot of people want to use the globe temperature to predict the mean radiant temperature of a human. But this does not look like a human. So this is another one we're trying to test against the CRT actually and see if people are using this, is there a way to correct your data so that you're actually modeling a cylindrical human that's the correct albedo rather than a globe per se. So all this is, it's a hollow globe, copper, it's painted a matte black, and you have just a little thermistor inside of it, and that just gives you a temperature, and you can imagine this gets really, really, really hot on sunny days. And so to make your wet bulb thermometer index, you combine it with a wet bulb temperature and an air temperature, and it's a weighted mean between the three. And that's all it is, really simply. But you have to have the air temperature, and you have to have a wet bulb temperature and then the wind to be able to estimate the mean radiant temperature of that. And that costs about $700. So we're looking at ways to kind of understand more fine scale changes. So we can set up this kind of weather station anywhere in an urban area. For the most part, we don't really leave it out for a long time, or you need someone with it, unless it's on a roof, because some of the instruments are really expensive. We also have set up all these instruments on a golf cart. We did a lot of urban transect studies in Phoenix, trying to understand that. So, but the way I have traditionally applied this kind of data in my work is looking at the human energy budget model. So I can take all these different observations, connect it with some human physiological data, put it into our mathematical model called COMPA, and then spit out an energy budget that will tell me if the person is comfortable, if they're hot, if they're very hot. So again, here's your observed radiation, and you can see that's actually still one of the most important variables in predicting heat stress on hot days. Then obviously your metabolism is a big part of everything, so the harder you're working, the hotter you're going to be. And then our pathways to losing heat, evaporation, emitted long-wave radiation, and convective heat. Under heat wave conditions, we actually see convective heat become a gain if the air temperature becomes a lot warmer than your skin temperature. So then we only have two forms of heat loss. That's what we're interested in there. So we can, so in order to be able to model this, we need all the measurements that I've talked about here. So air temperature, wind. We need to know what the person's wearing, what they're doing. We need to know if they're in shade or in the sun. So having the radiation measurements is really handy. We can use measurements from a CRT, and we model everything in the budget like a cylinder. So it's a human. So then if someone's sitting, we will model it differently than if someone's standing. So it's pretty neat to start to be able to play around with this in different applications. And I'll give you a few examples. This is an example from my PhD where we looked at 4 different parks in Toronto, and we wanted to understand the energy budget in the parks and then also the park cooling island intensity. So how much cooler was it in the park than out on the streets? What was the energy budget of someone in the park than outside on the streets? And so how do you think we got these transects? Anyone read the thesis? We actually threw a whole bunch of the instruments on a bike. And we did about 12 or 18 transects per park back and forth to understand all the different variables. So we actually have a big data logger right there. We're tracking the distance and location, temperature and relative humidity, and then pyranometers for the radiation. So I was able to take all that. We got a lot of questions. Yeah. But yeah, this is a neat experiment I did with another, actually a Master's of Landscape Architecture student. We were working on this together, so it's really interesting. So then you can see, this is just showing air temperature, but we could see a park cooling down intensity from that park. Just a tiny little park, but the maximum intensity we saw in Toronto was about 7 degrees Celsius cooler in the park than outside on the streets. And you can also see here that we have this extension out into the street. So given the wind direction this day, these houses got a little bit of the cooling from the park. So the way I think about this in terms of an adaptation measure is, okay, we're providing a naturally cooler space. We're also providing cooler air temperatures here that will result in hopefully someone using less air conditioning during hot times, which is a good thing. And I'm not going to talk too much about air conditioning, but we are pretty interested in understanding how can we reduce the temperatures in urban areas so that we're not creating so much anthropogenic heat from our air conditioners, and also so that we're not putting so much stress on the grid, because a few historical heat waves, including Chicago, has had have had the electricity go out, and once we lose air conditioning, we start really losing people. So it's our #1 adaptation measure. So if we can have more natural types of adaptation, that would be good. And then other examples. So we've taken the weather station and did a study in Lubbock to look at all these different surfaces throughout a city and see under clear sky, high sky view factor conditions, what are the best surfaces. So we did green roof, we did white roof, we did, well, we looked at both good and bad. So here we have it over a football field, that's artificial turf. And so I think we did 10 or 12 different surfaces. And we found green roof was really good, and obviously grass was really good. The worst surfaces were the asphalt and the football field. And so when we were out on this day on the football field, it was just over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and I could barely set up the station. Like, I was just like tiptoeing around because it was so hot. And so I went and got a infrared gun to take the surface temperature. And this was the worst surface in terms of the absorbed radiation that a human would feel on that surface. You can just imagine. And these artificial turf surfaces have those little black pellets in them too. So it makes it a lot hotter, and the albedo was the lowest, it was about 9. But we can use just infrared guns like this and take a surface temperature and then see what the surface temperature is. You can do your skin if you want. I'm pretty warm right now. But we can use these to get really fine touch scale measurements to see what the differences in urban materials that are used are. So from, we've done it in children's playgrounds where we've looked at the extreme temperatures that children are exposed to on different days using that. So I'll let you guys play with that if you want. That's a fun one. So we're really interested when we do studies like this in understanding the microclimatic properties of it and what a human would be feeling over its surface so that we can reverse some of the consequences of dark surfaces or lack of vegetation, anthropogenic heating, or the use of thermally massive materials, or the way we orient our buildings is really important too. I believe this is my last example. In the last few years, I've really started being interested in the effects on children, because children are a lot more vulnerable than the average person to heat and air pollution. So worldwide, it's well known that elderly suffer the most during heat, but children actually are the next on the list in terms of the rate at which they undergo either illness or death during heat. And so given the current understanding of how it will unfold, how climate change will unfold, infants and young children are actually likely to experience the greatest increase. So we started looking more at children's spaces and started to see how children interact with the weather, how they're affected by the weather, how they perceive the weather, and other climatic atmospheric conditions. So in terms of the playground study I mentioned, we were really interested in how can we apply principles of microclimatic energy design. So understanding how we can design to change the shade or change the surface, change the, I guess, principles in an area. We call this bioclimatic design because we're going to design differently depending on the climate zone we're in. So Phoenix will design very differently than in New York, but we did the study in Phoenix on really hot days to understand this. So it's very obvious that a lot of dark and metal surfaces can get really hot, but what's less obvious is that some well-intentioned surfaces such as astroturf or rubber actually get the hottest out of any. So these are some of our infrared pictures from our study in Phoenix. We did both the touch scale, we had that golf cart out getting all of our transects apart, and then we had these infrared cameras. The hottest surface we found was the rubber. In this picture, it's 80 degrees Celsius. When we did the touch scale measurements, it was 87 degrees Celsius. So kids burn themselves a lot in playgrounds. The slides were 71 or so, 70 degrees Celsius. But the main takeaway here is you'll notice that half this slide is green and half of it is red. There was a shade sail at this playground, so we had the opportunity to study the effect of a shade sail on lowering the surface temperatures in that playground. And this is just an example of what shade can do in any area, but we were able to show how much it lowered the surface temperature. So then here it was about 42 degrees Celsius this day. So by putting shade up, you can lower the surface temperatures to near air temperature, which made this playground then a lot safer for kids to play if they were out playing, made it actually usable. Otherwise, as you're in the sun, it's pretty much impossible to even play. So thinking about the place we're at with kids and obesity and asthma and all this kind of stuff, providing spaces using these principles of landscape design is really a neat area to be in, to understand and to create these spaces that kids can actually use a lot more and safer. You can go do a quick Google search if you want and see pictures of kids burning themselves in playgrounds. It's really not good pictures to find, but it happens a lot. So we focused in this, actually, and I didn't mention, we had this really neat overflight data where we had remote sensing data at 7-meter scale. We were able to compare a neighborhood scale to a 7-meter scale to the touch scale and see how much error you might then see if you're using the wrong scale of data. So that was interesting as well. And the last study I'll mention, very connected to that one, but now actually using real kids, is doing some personalized sensing of kids here in Lubbock. We did this spring, and what we're now doing is collecting individually experienced data of kids while they're playing in the playground. What we had on them were heart rate monitors while they played, then we had eye buttons, which look like this, so they all had eye buttons on their hips, and then they actually also all wore UVB dosimeters. So we could collect the exact amount of UVB radiation they're experiencing while they're playing on the playground. So you can see some of that there. I'll pass those around too. The eye buttons are about $25 each. The dosimeters are quite more expensive. They're about $350 each, so return that. But it's really neat to see the data because most of the playgrounds in Lubbock have zero shade. You can go drive around and you'll see zero shade in Lubbock. It was interesting because this playground had this one shade sail over this concrete stage where the kids actually were not allowed to play on. They weren't allowed to go up there. But for our study and for our kids, we did these different days of understanding their thermal comfort in shade and in sun. And so we actually got them to play foursquare in the shade with all these sensors on, and then in the sun. So they're just playing, but that's under the shade sail. They're all wearing their instruments, and then you can see behind there, I'll show you in a minute. There was another group of kids playing in the sun. And these were on really hot days, the kids kept begging to go in the shade, and we're like, no. and then they were allowed to switch. But we had the weather station set up too, so we're getting all this really great microclimate data, and then we're getting their individual experience data under the shade sail. And then we also surveyed them to validate our model for thermal comfort of children. Because if you think of every single heat index that's been created, the parent temperature, our model, the web flow thermometer, the Humidex, they're all created for like a 25-year-old male. So probably also why all the temperatures in rooms are set for male comfort. So girls will get cold really easy. But so validating the models for real human responses in field studies is really valuable in the literature today. So I'm going to end there, and I know I didn't talk about too much outside of extreme heat. So this is from the USGRQ report, all the different climate drivers and the pathways to different health endpoints. So if you want to talk about any of these two over the next 25 minutes or so, we can. I know my colleagues in here talk about infectious disease on Friday morning, so we don't need to talk too much about that. But if you want to talk about air pollution, I can talk about that, or more about heat, extreme cold. So whatever you guys want, we can talk. So yeah.
So first off, how long ago? Like when did you do the putting the children playing in the sun versus?
That was in May.
Okay. So are you planning on, once you have some good results and data from that, are are you planning to take that to the city? And
We're actually really working hard right now to get it changed down over the actual equipment there. It's interesting, Lubbock has, a few years ago, they built, I don't know, over 50 new playgrounds. The playgrounds are outstanding if you go look at them and you look at how brand new they are. They were, I think, $93,000 each is what I read in a news article.
Yeah, there was a $5 million bond issue for.
Yeah. But unless it's during school time, there's no one out there playing. And if you look at the way they're designed, whether like winter and summer, there's no wind blocks in the winter and there's no shade sails in the summer. So there's so much that can be done for these spaces so that they can be used more safely and that kids will actually be comfortable and want to go to them in terms of microclimatic design. Kids aren't going to think this way, but I can't drive by a playground anymore without thinking this. Usually I'll show a picture when I travel. I'll run, and then when I run, I'll take pictures, and then I'll start taking pictures of playgrounds. Sounds creepy. So I have pictures from Sweden and Germany and Korea now of how differently the playgrounds are designed, the different kind of equipment that's used, and how much they focus. They use completely different surfaces, and they'll really maintain their tree canopy cover. It's really interesting to me. And last summer, because I was so interested in this and why playgrounds here are designed so differently, I got my certification as a playground inspector. And I wanted to know what goes into them saying this playground is safe versus this playground. And rubber is a surface that they tell you should use if you can. AstroTurf's okay. You're not allowed to use grass in the normal playing area because apparently it's too hard to fall on, which, okay, I understand there's a lot of other situations that they're more worried about in terms of kids hurting themselves in playgrounds. So soft surfaces was a really important one. But you see all these, like they didn't talk about shade once during the entire training that I had, which I would love to be able to take this research then and put it into their guidelines and put it into their training so that this is on the minds of people who are designing the playground. And playgrounds is just a really neat example of one little spot in an urban area where a lot of what we're learning there can be applied elsewhere. So why do you use metal benches? Or why don't you shade this bench in this kind of orientation? In Phoenix, we're working on the thermal comfort of bus stops because people spend a lot of time at bus stops in Phoenix and it's really hot and they're designing new shade sail structures for the bus stop. So that's one example of where we can apply some of this information in the really hot places. Yeah.
Have you done any large-scale studies, for example, a statewide study? And if you did, how would you go about it? Like, do you think using more sensing imagery would be something?
Yeah, we want to get more data for other cities using this minor scale remote sensing data alongside the touch scale data, because right now we only have it for Phoenix, and so we'd like to expand it to different cities and different climate zones, because obviously we're going to think very differently the way we design these urban spaces and places further up north than in Phoenix where it's sunny and hot all the time. If we're thinking about Toronto, we can't just put up shade everywhere because in the winter people actually really need the sun. So then you start thinking of big deciduous trees, how are we going to orient this so that it provides the most shade in the summer and then it sheds its leaves in the winter and still can provide the sun. So we're thinking more climate zone comparison wise rather than full statewide. But that would be, NASA's developing a lot of new platforms to put on their planes so that we can get actually even finer scale data. So we do have a proposal in with NASA right now to hopefully get some money to do more of this work in different cities. Yeah.
And how much do you think the government is willing to invest in sort of a computer system that generates real-time heat distribution? I mean,
I think a lot. Yeah, the National Integrated Heat Health Warning System is ran through NOAA, the government, and they're putting a lot of emphasis on this to start doing the work. They don't have much funding yet, so if they want to do something like that, they're going to have to come up with more funding for the initiative. But a lot of, I mean, there actually might be some cities that already have some real-time data for people to see, but it would be neat to be able to see those maps, and urban planners and city level type people are the most interested. So that kind of result could come from the city level. So the sustainability offices or urban planning offices, they're the ones that are most interested, and they might be the ones that need to fund it. A lot of these new, urban down mitigation measures and techniques, they come from below, from the local state or local governments rather than above from the federal government. So yeah, but that's what a lot of people's goals are, to be able to have either a really nicely validated WRF model predicting all the temperatures throughout an urban area, or more data from stations, high-end weather stations that are, backyard weather stations. Because we can all go on Weather Underground and go look at a bunch of backyard weather stations, but the validity of the data is always going to be a question for those ones. But if these are on routes or they're ran by the National Weather Service, then that's kind of data that we can use to do actual studies with. Because there's lots of studies looking at different neighborhoods and different temperatures in neighborhoods and health outcomes, and finding that the lower income neighborhoods have less green space, more concrete, and then they're also suffering the most because they don't have air conditioning and it's hotter. Yeah. So there's lots of, most of those cities also come from Phoenix, but there's others throughout Indianapolis and Florida. That's the kind of information that city level planners want to know.
I was curious if, so it sounds like shade is really like your big.
It's my favorite. Well, in a place like Lubbock, yes, and Phoenix, that's the number one way to improve an environment.
So I guess I was interested. Are there any other things that are sort of counter conservation wise to what like a urban heat island context, like in Las Vegas, pushing towards zero C? Is that sort of increasing your solar radiation, your net solar radiation?
That's a good question. Xeriscaping, and I've learned recently it's very different depending on the city you're in, but I know the xeriscaping principle is best for Phoenix. And one of the, I reviewed a paper like 4 years ago on it, and they're interested in how much water, because it's all for water saving, right? Because it's hard to grow grass in some of these places. So how much less water will you use for xeriscaping? But then if you do the calculations or you do the measurements of the amount of radiation and how much hotter it's going to get around a xeriscape property, then you're actually increasing the heat load on your house. So you have this trade-off, and I haven't seen a great study yet that's been able to do this trade-off between the water use for cooling your house versus the water use for watering your grass.
I know.
So John might know.
No, as a gardener, I know for every height of tree on your foot, you actually decrease your energy use in your house by about 10%.
So then there's the shade again.
Just because of shading during the summer.
But it's hard to grow a 40-foot tree overnight.
Well, but that's the trade-off, and so that's part of the problem that's happening here in Lubbock too, as we're doing more and more zero-scaping kinds of things for water conservation. Our heat island effect is going on. Because we don't have enough transpiration, and it's not enough evapotranspiration in the landscape because it's agriculture would cool us down either.
Yeah, so it's that's a really interesting area of research right now. I think we need better data from residential areas to understand how water is being used in the home, and then more studies understanding, and that would be a really neat study to propose actually, just do that comparison between, especially Lubbock has some really good examples of xeriscape versus all grass, and I've talked to quite a few people in Lubbock who have nice big trees and nice yards, and they don't worry too much about cooling. They don't have to cool near as much. I mean, I'm really lucky. My apartment is really shaded, and I can come home after no air conditioning all day, and it's quite comfortable, which is nice.
Grass will not cool.
Yeah.
So the lawns are matter.
Has to be wet.
It's having trees and shrubs large enough to shade, have enough evapotranspiration to actually change that heat.
Yeah, because when we actually put the weather station over dry grass in Lubbock, we didn't find that much of a difference between concrete and dry grass.
Right.
Because you need that moisture and you need that evapotranspiration to actually cool off the area, especially here. Yeah, so that's a good study.
Well, just to build on that comment, I'm at the university of Arizona, and
Yeah.
so I know a lot. Well, I mean, I know a lot of studies that have looked at the heat island effect and xeriscaping. Well, and it seems like even in desert environments, you can still have large trees.
Yeah,
And also, depending on the material that the buildings are built out of,
Yes.
it also makes a really big difference.
So that's a really neat, like thinking microclimatic design. You can go down to Phoenix or Tucson or Miami, and the way the houses are built and painted and structured are completely different than here up north. The types of materials and roofing materials and colors are very different, and you see more houses that are going to be one floor rather than two, and all these things to stop the amount of heat absorption and how hot it gets in the buildings. I agree, and I learned at a workshop last month that in Tucson they have a tree program, and they'll give trees to people to plant, and there's 100% mortality rate on trees you give to people to plant, because they're so hard to take care of in those environments. You need so much TLC for these trees, and you need to hire someone in the city to do that.
Actually, that's a good point. So remember I was talking about the 2011 drought here, we had 4 inches of rain. Lubbock lost almost 50% of its trees in some way, shape, or form.
You need like the city to really be on board with keeping the trees healthy, because I probably couldn't even keep a tree alive. I'm like pushing these trees in urban areas. I should probably take a course. But yeah, so that I was so surprised when I heard that, because Tucson's doing so much work in this area, the university. Yeah.
Have you thought about, you talked a lot about testing, thanks again, by the way, Jenni, for talking, it's great. You've talked a lot about testing different surfaces, testing different landscape types. Have you thought about going the opposite route and testing different types of shade, like a tin roof versus a tree?
Oh yeah. So for that Phoenix study over the different surfaces, we had results for shade or shale shade, tree shade, and then in the sun. And so then you can start to see over grass, and we tried to get as much as we could the same surface under the shade sail versus the tree shade. And it's so dependent for the tree on the type of tree. So it was a big leaf tree versus a small leaf tree, and in Phoenix you have a lot of heat and things like that. But if we were to go up into the northeast, you're going to find a lot of the big leaf trees that are going to provide a lot more shading. So there are a lot of tables out there that will tell you the transmissivity of a tree under different times of the year, and it'll tell you when it leaves and when it loses its leaves and all that kind of stuff. That's really helpful in understanding this. But we can easily calculate transmissivity ourselves with that in every number. So, but yeah, the shade type is really important. We can't just say go throw a tree up there, because some of the trees, like that one right there, is not doing anything in terms of shade, but maybe someday it will. And then the orientation is so important, so that it's blocking this out facing sun. I can't now, every time I drive by a playground with a shade sail, I will analyze its orientation to the sun. I can't help it. Yeah.
So my question goes into, what about like in Central Texas or in California areas that, there people are very specifically recommended, do not keep trees next to your house because of what you have wildfire problems, because you have natural disaster, the trees will fall on your house, and where you might save $3,000 worth of electricity, versus $50,000.
Yeah, so I don't know all the standards for that. You can still have a tree quite a ways away from your house and then have shade, but at the same time, the wildfire thing has never even crossed my mind as an issue. So thanks for bringing that up. And yeah,
That's
I,
interesting for us.
yeah, hurricanes and trees, yeah, so, I don't know how to get to that question. It's a good thing to think about, I've never been asked that, I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that or knows some studies that have looked at that.
Well, actually,
Wildfires.
the American Horticultural Society has a lot of information on it.
Oh, really?
They do, yeah, because the Horticultural Society is trying to figure out how to manage the whole
Yeah.
question of fire and heat and drought and cost. And so those societies actually do a lot of science, but horticultural,
Yeah.
but it never makes it into the climate literature.
Wow, that's interesting. Because, yeah,
Yeah, there are probably several recommendations on what kind of trees you should be going in your backyard.
for like forest fires?
Yes.
Or, oh,
Yes,
And
and
also really
you have
hot.
a wide selection of trees for different heights.
Yeah.
Different care requirement, pruning wise.
Right,
and all that.
and,
So there's already good recommendations. It should be from your state department.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, one of the problems too is with a lot of your points on that tree out there, one of the things that Lubbock has done
Yeah.
is that it's gone away from big trees.
I noticed that, like, you go to Tech Terrace, and
Right.
there's all these nice big trees, and that's the only spot really allowing that.
Yeah, what they've done is they've moved away from the big elms for whatever reason. And they're planting a lot of smaller oaks, and they're more shrubby oaks and whatnot. So they're not gonna get very big, they're just for aesthetic pleasing rather than for shade on the buildings. They won't big, and they won't do any shade. And part of it is just water use. They figure it's gonna cost less water to a small tree. But it's really changing the dynamic of what, and then, as you drove through Tech, you see a lot of trees. What you don't know is 3 years ago, they cut down 100 elms. They're huge. They just said they're at the end of the life and they come alive. And they took out the whole middle part of campus and had to come back in and spend all this money putting what they, and they put live oaks that won't get more than 20 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about any experience you've had with communicating your science. So how you've done it, or with leverage in policy makers or to the general public.
Lots to the general public. With Catherine, she's helped me get like all these really great opportunities in talking to my first in Texas and to community members around here, science by the glasses. And so it's mostly been to the general public. I haven't made it to the point where I feel comfortable like teaching this to policy because I don't have enough data, I don't think. So that has not happened yet, but that would be fun. I don't even know yet how I'll feel about that, but a lot of even states will come in contact with me because to them, it's great, like for their kind of company, like some people from Australia and stuff. I think it's really big in Australia. But yeah, mostly general public, and most people kind of pick up. Because it's so fun. I find it funny because I talk to it a lot and everyone picks up all the shade sales and then playground stuff. So yeah, a lot of people in the community like it because they can apply it to their lives or their kids. And I'll use this in talks. We spoke to Environment Texas at Earth Day Texas to teach them about some of the strategies that Catherine and I used to communicate some of the science to people. And my research is really good at pulling on kind of your heartstrings with your kids, right? If your kids are going to be exposed to heat, it's not good for them. Air pollution, not good for them. Same with you, but people are going to take action more for their kids than themselves. And so some of the bigger messages and that you can use in getting people to change their way of thinking is through their kids, actually. So in terms of communicating, that's what I found really impactful. But it wasn't until about 3 years when I came to Tech, or right before I came to Tech, I really started realizing this big gap in the literature for kids, and that we know so much about adults, yet kids are vulnerable, and yet there's very few studies on understanding this, but you have to go through IRB for some of this.
Yeah.
So we can only do so much with kids.
Is urban compactness something that you consider to mitigate problems? Because I'm from Turkey, and in my country, almost all buildings are really tall, at least 5 stories, and they're really close to each other, which is a problem for a lot of things. But if you're walking on the street, you get the shading from the buildings, and I think a lot of the buildings, they also provide shading for each other.
Yeah, that's, so in that study that I showed you from New York, because New York also has that, I'm gonna try and pull up a slide about that really quickly. New York also has a lot of building shading, and what we found specifically for New York is this urban cool island effect, where we do see lower temperatures in the urban area because of the building. So there's a cooling effect. So here we have, this is our urban daylight intensity. The black is for nighttime and the blue is for daytime. So what do you notice about the daytime? There's a whole bunch of temperatures that are negative. So quite a few studies have shown this. And it's in big cities like New York, like in Turkey. Where we start seeing actually urban cooling island effect. Only in the daytime though, you won't really see much at night. And there's quite a few reasons for that. There's attenuation from aerosols from cars in the urban area that doesn't allow as much radiation in the urban area in some cities. Then you also have the shading effect that was mentioned. So just not getting, the buildings literally are just not yet exposed to radiation at the lower sun angles in the morning. So the cooling effect is greatest in the morning, and then as you go over into the later afternoon, you start seeing that urban challenge intensify. And then that's why it's greatest overnight too. And then quite a few studies have done this, and I have that here. So you have all this energy storage in the daytime. I list studies here. Most studies are done in Europe and around the world. I think the US can do a lot more work in this area to understand the urban cool island effect. Because it's this contradiction to what everyone kind of thinks about, which makes it a really area of research. But lots of people found this, but it's mostly starting in the early morning and going over, into the early afternoon. So, but then even placements of your stations, right? So you might have a station that's always in shade versus another station that's always in sun. So you actually really need to understand the placement of your stations in terms of why you might be seeing these results. But most of the time, stations are placed on rooftops. All these ones are at a height of 2 meters, and as far as we could tell from the pictures and from the information, they were not shaded. But like one was actually near this bridge that had a ton of cars on it all the time, and it was a hot spot. But that's because it was near all this anthropogenic heat from cars, so we were able to explain that observation. So this is an example.
Are there any concerns about damage to infrastructure as a result of extreme heat, and is that something that cities or developers are concerned about?
Yes, so a really good example of that is the map I showed you of Australia for that heat wave a couple of summers ago. They had all this warping of their train lines because it got so hot the material couldn't handle that heat, and so they were like spraying them off with water, but your whole kind of system has to shut down. That's a big one that cities are thinking about. Bridges, culverts, and Catherine and Ann Stoner, she's doing all this work with engineers from the Northeast to understand the kind of materials they use and if what we're putting in place now can handle the temperatures 50 years from now. You can ask Catherine when you see her. Engineers will bring out this big book of laws they have to follow when they build a bridge or when they do something. They're made 50 years ago. They're not using data that they're not planning for 50, 70 years down the line. They're using data from 50 years ago. And so engineers have to follow these rules because if something goes wrong, they can be sued. And so they kind of have their hands tied. But then there's like Catherine and Ann doing this work to kind of try and show them, no, let's start thinking, this bridge needs to last for 50 years, 100 years. It's got to use the right materials to be able to withstand the heat. Or the new variabilities in temperatures and all that, road crafting, all that. So this is on the minds of a lot of people, I think. But maybe not. The engineers just can't do anything right now. It's kind of crappy.
So we should be also thinking about extreme cold too.
Yeah. Because we know we're still hitting some minimum, but at the same time we're hitting like 7 to 1 now maximum to minimum temperatures during the year. But we're still going to see extreme cold records. And so that variability is really tough to handle for some cities that deal with extreme heat and extreme cold during the year. But same with people acclimatizing to the temperatures. So I'm from Canada. I don't handle the heat here very well at all. I biked last night and I was like, oh my god. So, so people and cities, like as a whole, need to be able to withstand the variability.
So just a small question. So what is putting wooden logs